My job isn't exactly one that invites a bustling social life. Most days I'm buried in reports, meetings, and data until the city outside my window fades into night. Because of that, my world had shrunk to my office walls, quiet, efficient, and lonely. Naturally, my mom started worrying. In her mind, a daughter who barely went out must either be broken-hearted or uninterested in men altogether. Her solution? Arrange a marriage for me. And not just any man. Jonas Fletcher, the only son of the wealthiest family in town. On paper, he was flawless, refined, charming, and apparently a walking success story. The kind of man people whispered about in admiration. I didn't even have time to object. Before I knew it, the invitations were printed, the venue was booked, and a custom wedding gown was being designed for me. A gift from my boss, who thought it'd make the perfect congratulations present. But on the day of the ceremony, everything crumbled. When I entered the dressing room, the Fletcher gown that had been tailored just for me was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I found it crumpled and tossed into the trash like some old rag. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a cleaner's blunder or some cruel prank. But before I could even make sense of it, a woman barged in. Tall, sharp, and dripping with attitude. She held up a bridesmaid's dress, pale pink, cheap fabric, and threw it at me like she was feeding scraps to a dog. "What are you staring at?" she snapped. "The ceremony's starting. Get dressed." Her tone was brisk, practiced, like she'd been waiting to say it. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice even. "You must be mistaken. I'm the bride." She gave a dramatic roll of her eyes. "Oh, please. Just put it on and stop wasting everyone's time." Then she smirked, stepping closer. "Mr. Fletcher decided that I'll be taking your place at the altar." For a moment I couldn't move. The words didn't even register. When they finally did, my hands trembled, not with fear, but disbelief. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jonas's number. He picked up after a few rings. His tone was calm, too calm. "Mr. Fletcher," I said tightly, "don't you think your family owes me an explanation for this? My name is still listed as your fiancé in every legal document filed for this marriage." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Explanation? About what exactly?" I blinked, thinking I misheard him. "About replacing your bride on the day of the wedding," I said sharply. "Surely that's not something that happens every weekend." But before I could finish, the line went dead. He'd hung up. The sound of the disconnected tone echoed in my ear, and my stomach dropped. The secretary, Kyla, as one of the staff whispered, smiled like she was watching a show. "Miss Stone," she said mockingly, "you should really know your place. You should be thankful, honestly. Not everyone gets the chance to marry into the Fletcher family. You must have been born under a lucky star." Her gaze traveled over me, my modest makeup, my simple bun, the lack of designer labels, and her smirk widened. I took a step back, glaring. "I am the bride, and I will not be putting that on." Then I turned toward the staff nearby and said, "If she keeps this up, call security." For a moment I thought I'd taken back control, but Kyla just scoffed. "Security?" she laughed. "Sweetheart, you're in New York. This is the Fletchers' territory. You think anyone here would dare lift a finger for you?" Her voice rose, sharp as glass. Spit flew as she ranted, her arrogance filling the room. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "A businessman pretending to be royalty," I said quietly but firmly. "How pathetic." Her eyes went dark. "Who do you think you are, talking like that on Fletcher property?" she hissed. "Last warning, wear that dress, or I'll make sure this wedding turns into your funeral." The words sliced through the air, and for a heartbeat, everything went still. I'd worked in one office since college, surrounded by polite professionalism, not open hostility. No one had ever dared to threaten me before. But this woman, she had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. My anger finally boiled over. "Try me," I said coldly. A murmur rippled through the room. "Is she crazy? She just went against Miss Kyla," one staff member whispered. "Yeah, she's throwing away a marriage with the Fletchers over a dress," Another scoffed. Some people don't know how good they've got it. But they didn't understand. This wasn't about a dress. It was about dignity, and I wasn't about to hand mine over. The room had turned into a low hum of gossip. Whispers pushed against the air like a tide. Kyla's smirk only widened as the crowd's amusement fed her. "A nobody," she said, loud enough for half the staff to hear. "No pedigree, no resume, thinking she can play bride. Cute fantasy." Her words were meant to sting, but they landed oddly. More ridiculous than wounding. I found myself almost amused by the theater of it all. "Kyla Snee, is it?" I replied, voice steady. "I'll say this once more. Give me back my dress." Her smile curled into something colder. "Give it back? Don't make me laugh." She tossed the phrase like a challenge. Then, as if words weren't enough, she started cursing under her breath, each syllable sharpened by contempt. She didn't stop at insults. She pushed her sleeves up and marched straight at me. A storm headed my way. "You can't even argue without resorting to fists," I asked, unruffled. "Is that the Fletchers' idea of diplomacy?" Her response was physical. A wild, clumsy swing aimed at my face. The blows didn't connect. They landed on empty air and fabric. That only seemed to fuel her fury. "You insolent! Stand still or I'll show you what the Fletchers do to troublemakers," she hissed, nostrils flaring. "Shall I call Jonas right now?" I didn't flinch. Not because I was brave, but because I'd been trained, politely, firmly, to never let my emotions become a liability at work. My supervisor's voice echoed in my head. "Every action reflects the organization. Stay composed." And besides, I'm not one for street brawls. If I ever retaliated, I wouldn't do it to warn. I'd do it to finish things. That thought kept my hands at my sides like iron. Kyla mistook my restraint for submission and lunged forward again. Her fist cut the air. The room tensed. Then a voice like gravel and authority split through the chaos. "Enough." Everyone turned as a man filled the doorway, tall and immovable as a column. He moved with the kind of quiet power that forced attention. Dark suit, shoulders broad, a retinue of silent guards behind him. The staff parted instinctively. "Kyla!" he barked. "What in God's name are you doing?" This was him. Jonas Fletcher, the groom, the one whose name had been on every whispered invitation and every glossy announcement. Mom had not exaggerated. He looked like someone sculpted to command rooms, elegant, practiced, impossibly composed. But the look he gave me was something else entirely. Cool, detached, as though the moment belonged to someone else. "Mr. Fletcher." I stepped forward, offering a courteous smile I didn't feel. "I'm Athena Stone. We—" "Spare me the introductions," he cut in, impatience draped over his words. "I have zero interest in who you are." For a beat, my brain registered the absurdity. I was supposed to be his bride, the family he was joining, and yet he dismissed me like a discardable name on a guest list. "Basic courtesy is not too much to ask," I said, keeping my voice level. "We may never have met, but that doesn't grant anyone the right to humiliate me." His expression hardened like ice. "Courtesy?" he echoed, a smirk of disdain. "Athena, do yourself a favor and look in a mirror. Ask whether someone like you is worthy of someone like me." The laugh that followed was low and humorless. "If my father hadn't insisted on this arrangement," he went on, louder now so the room could hear, "I would never have given you the time of day. You add nothing to my life." He turned, as if concluding a performance, and addressed the room. "Do not get any funny ideas. A wedding today does not mean she becomes part of this family. Not now, not ever." The words were meant to humiliate. They landed, though not in the way he intended. Instead of crumbling, I let a short, ironic laugh slip out. It sounded almost like a release. "Fine," I said, letting my tone go cool and clipped. "If that's how you see things, I won't force the issue." I paused, letting the silence gather. but don't mistake my calm for weakness. Faces around us shifted, some with shock, others with the thrill of gossip. Kyla, flushed with victory, straightened as if she'd triumphed. Jonas watched me for a moment, assessing, amused by the breach of etiquette I represented. Then he turned away, shoulders squared, and left the dressing room with his retinue, as if closing a book on the scene. When the door clicked shut behind him, the air felt different, thinner, charged. People resumed their hushed conversations, but there was now an undercurrent, curiosity, judgment, something like pity. I collected myself slowly, smoothing my dress and pulling my hair into something resembling composure. My wedding had been derailed not by fate, but by people who treated human beings like props. And I made a quiet decision then. If this was the way the Fletchers treated me, I wouldn't disappear into silence. I would not beg for a role they'd decided to deny me. Whatever came next, humiliation, resistance, or escape, I would face it on my own terms. I think it's safe to say this wedding doesn't need to happen anymore. Those were the first words out of my mouth after the chaos. Calm, deliberate, a peace offering wrapped in finality. But of course, the man standing before me, Jonas Fletcher, heir to an empire, owner of an ego larger than his father's company, thought I was bluffing. He leaned back slightly, amusement flickering across his expression. Quit pretending, Athena. You think I don't recognize this game? Push and pull, act like you're different, make me chase you. It's pathetic. He gave a condescending chuckle. Women have been lining up to marry into my family since I was old enough to wear a suit. Don't think you're special because you got this far. I stared at him, briefly wondering how someone so handsome could be so utterly insufferable. Then, I couldn't help it. I laughed. Mr. Fletcher, I said, smiling faintly, I don't care how many women would kill to marry you. I'm not one of them. In fact, I wouldn't touch this circus of a family with a 10-foot pole. The room collectively inhaled. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Bridesmaids, planners, and random staff pretending to fix things just to stay and watch the drama unfold. Did she just insult the Fletchers to his face? Someone whispered. She's lost it, another hissed. Every girl in New York would sell their soul to be in her position. If it were me, I'd wear whatever they told me to, a voice added. Money like that doesn't come twice. But their words barely registered. To me, the Fletchers' power was an illusion, built on inherited privilege and the trembling hands of people too afraid to speak truth. Money didn't impress me. Influence didn't scare me. Because I knew what real power looked like, the kind that made billionaires sweat. And I remembered vividly. Jonas's father had once come to my workplace himself. He had sat across from my superior, pleading in hushed tones for approval on a business deal that could make or break their entire corporation. I'd watched from across the conference room, silent, observing as the mighty CEO of Fletcher Corporation wiped his forehead, terrified that one wrong word could cost him everything. That was the first time I realized that money without integrity is just paper. And now, watching his son, arrogant, reckless, blind to consequence, I saw the beginning of the same downfall his father had narrowly escaped. Athena. Jonas's voice cut through my thoughts, tight with disbelief. Are you seriously calling off this engagement? I met his gaze without hesitation. Completely. He froze for a second, as if expecting me to backtrack. When I didn't, his jaw clenched. You'll regret this. Before he could say anything else, Kyla stepped forward, practically glowing from self-importance. Don't worry, Mr. Fletcher, she purred. I'll explain things to your father. She's nobody. A forgettable name. You don't need her. Jonas hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But the invitations. The guests are already arriving. If we cancel now, it'll humiliate my family. Kyla placed a hand dramatically on her chest. You don't have to worry about that, she said, smiling like a cat with cream. I'm still here. He blinked, processing. You mean? She nodded, eyes gleaming. We go through with it. I'll take her place. A collective gasp rippled across the room. Jonas's expression softened into relief. Kyla, you'd really do that? Of course, she said sweetly, batting her lashes. I'd never let your family lose face. Once it's done, I'm sure they'll know how to repay my loyalty. I almost laughed at the performance. The desperation, the greed, the complete lack of shame. It was almost admirable. Almost. Well, I said finally, folding my arms. Now that your little crisis is resolved, Mr. Fletcher, there's one last thing we need to settle. He frowned. What now? I pointed to the nearby trash bin, where my ruined dress still lay in a crumpled heap of ivory fabric. That gown was custom-made, a personal commission from my department head. It wasn't just fabric. It represented months of planning, design, and personal cost. You and your team destroyed it. You owe me both an explanation and compensation. A hush fell, then laughter broke out, cruel and loud. She's insane, someone giggled. Who asks for compensation after being dumped at the altar? It's just a dress, another snorted. The Fletchers could buy her 1,000 replacements. I slowly turned toward them, my voice cutting through the noise, calm, sharp, unshakable. It's not about the dress, I said evenly. It's about respect. Something money clearly can't buy in this room. The laughter died instantly. Even Jonas's smirk faltered. I picked up the edge of my ruined gown, brushed off a stray ribbon, and met his gaze one last time. Congratulations, Mr. Fletcher, I said quietly. You just lost more than a wedding. You lost the one person in this city who could have saved your family from what's coming. Then I turned and walked out, leaving behind whispers, the stench of perfume, and an empire that had no idea it had just signed its own downfall. Listen, everyone, I began, steadying my breath. Maybe to some people this dress doesn't look like much, but what it represents can't be priced in money. Jonas tilted his head slightly, a hint of mockery twisting his lips. He clearly didn't get it. It's just a dress, he said, voice dripping with arrogance as he stepped closer. Why make it sound like it's sacred? His polished shoes clicked softly on the marble floor as he drew near, his smirk widening. Come on, Athena. Let's not pretend. You just want a payout, right? So name your price. 100 grand? 1 million? I locked eyes with him, holding my ground though fury burned behind my calm exterior. Mr. Fletcher, do you really believe everything in this world can be fixed with money? He raised a brow, unbothered, his tone colder than before. Doesn't it? Then he leaned in slightly, his words sharp as glass. You must have forgotten whose city you're standing in. This is my family's territory. If I make one call, you'll disappear before sunrise. I felt the air tighten around us. Slowly, I curled my hands into fists and replied evenly, So, that's a threat? Before he could answer, his secretary, Kyla, stepped forward, sneering. Damn right it is. What? You gonna cry about it now? She moved closer, eyes full of challenge. Go on, tough girl, hit me. Let's see what happens. I turned toward her, my voice flat and steady. Let me guess. You actually think being someone's obedient lapdog makes you powerful? Her confidence cracked instantly. Color rushed to her cheeks and she stuttered, unable to find words. Seeing her falter, Jonas quickly stepped between us, shielding her. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? Kyla's been with me since college. She's family. You owe her an apology. And if you don't give it right now, you're not walking out of this room. Funny, I thought. In less than an hour, I'd been threatened twice. Not by foreign operatives or criminals, but by a spoiled heir and his overzealous assistant. In all my years serving in a covert government division, I'd never seen arrogance so misplaced. Enough was enough. Without saying another word, I took out my phone and dialed a number. Boss, it's Athena. His familiar voice came alive instantly. Well, Athena, did you finally meet your so-called fiancé? What's he like, huh? I exhaled sharply, my tone clipped. Boss, I wish I was calling with good news. The custom wedding dress you had made for me, it's gone. Someone threw it into a trash can. There was a moment of silence. Then his voice erupted through the speaker. What? You'd better not be joking. That dress had a Medal of Honor sewn into the lining. My patience finally snapped. Do I sound like I'm joking, boss? And it gets better. The person who did it not only refused to apologize, she threatened to kill me. I quickly relayed everything that had happened. On the other end, I heard a crash. Glass shattering, followed by the sound of someone slamming their desk. Who did it? He thundered. Before I could answer, Kyla snatched the phone right out of my hand. So you're the so-called boss? She scoffed. I'm Jonas Fletcher's personal secretary. If you've got a problem, you deal with me. There was a pause, one so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then his voice came, low and controlled. So you're the one who destroyed Athena's dress, and then threatened her life. She smirked, completely unaware of who she was taunting. Old man, you really need to stop watching crime dramas. Nobody in this city dares touch the Fletchers. And with that, she hung up. The room went dead silent. Jonas gave her a small nod, clearly approving her defiance. She looked proud, like she'd just protected her king. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A low, genuine laugh that made both of them freeze. Mr. Fletcher, I said, smiling faintly. You sure know how to pick loyal people. I've met fearless soldiers, but never someone quite as bold as your secretary. Kyla crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Please, I don't care who your boss is. As long as Mr. Fletcher stands, the Fletcher name isn't going anywhere. I tilted my head slightly, the corner of my mouth lifting. Is that so? Then tell me, what if, after tonight, the Fletcher name disappears from this city altogether? Before she could laugh it off, someone near the window shouted, "Look outside!" Everyone turned. Through the glass walls, a fleet of sleek black Audi A6s rolled into view, each bearing the unmistakable NY1 government license plate. The convoy stretched down the street like a living shadow, glinting under the morning light. In that moment, all the arrogance in the room began to dissolve, one heartbeat at a time. For a split second, no one in the room breathed. Outside, the black convoy gleamed beneath the streetlights. Sleek, identical cars lined up with military precision. The air itself seemed to hum. Kyla was the first to crack. Her head whipped toward me and the blood drained from her face. Sir, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" she stammered, hurrying toward the entrance. We would have prepared something, I swear." The doors opened, and from the lead vehicle stepped a man in his 50s wearing a dark tailored coat. His posture alone commanded silence. 2 aides flanked him, earpieces glinting under the lights. "We're here on behalf of the counselor to attend Miss Stone's wedding," the man announced. His tone was calm, but every syllable carried authority. "Where is she?" Every pair of eyes in the hall shifted toward me. Kyla froze mid-step, staring as if she'd just realized who she'd insulted. I took my time walking forward, the click of my heels echoing off the marble floor. "Apologies for the inconvenience," I said quietly. "Didn't expect you'd have to come all the way here in person." The man inclined his head and clasped my hands with both of his, firm, respectful. His gaze softened. "The counselor spoke highly of you," he said. "Said you were the kind of woman who can stand shoulder to shoulder with generals." A ripple of shock swept through the onlookers. Kyla's throat bobbed. Sir, she managed. "Are you absolutely sure this is the same Miss Stone? She's just some guest. Maybe there's been a mistake?" The man turned his eyes on her, calm, sharp, unblinking. "You're the Fletcher family's secretary, correct?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Then you should know," he said, his tone cooling. "We were instructed by higher authorities to be present for this Miss Stone ceremony. There is no mistake." Her knees almost buckled. Sir, forgive me. But for Mr. Fletcher's sake, could you tell me who she really is?" "I'm afraid that information is classified." The finality in his voice cut through the room like a blade. Sweat rolled down Kyla's temple. Jonas, who had been standing rigid behind her, finally stepped forward. His pride wouldn't let him stay silent any longer. "Sir, I'm Jonas Fletcher, son of Victor Fletcher, chairman of Fletcher Corporation." He straightened his jacket, forcing a polite smile. "As her husband, surely I have a right to know who my wife actually is." The man hesitated before replying, a hint of sympathy flickering across his expression. "Mr. Fletcher, I respect your family's influence, but this matter is beyond corporate ranks. Even as Miss Stone's husband, you're not cleared to access her records." The hall erupted in low gasps. "Did he just say not even her husband has clearance?" someone whispered. "Who the hell is this woman? One call and she brings in New York tier officials?" Another murmured. "There are maybe 10 people in the country who could pull that off." From the corner of my eye, I saw Jonas's jaw tighten. His arrogance had evaporated. What remained was disbelief. "Well," someone in the crowd said under their breath, "looks like the Fletcher empire just met its match." I took a slow breath, then faced Jonas squarely. "Mr. Fletcher," I said evenly, "my guests are here. Don't you think it's time we finally discussed the matter of my wedding dress?" His eyes flicked nervously toward the officials, then back to me. "Athena," he said, voice taut. "I just checked online. There's nothing about that dress. No record, no designer, no trace of this so-called Medal of Honor you keep talking about." A faint smile curved my lips. "Of course there isn't," I said softly. "Some things were never meant to be found on the internet." Kyla brandished her phone like a talisman, grinning as though she'd already won. She paraded it in front of me, fingers trembling with triumph. I kept my expression neutral, then let a small, deliberate smile play across my lips. "Mr. Fletcher," I said softly, "it appears your secretary's knowledge stretches only as far as whatever the internet coughs up. That gown wasn't a boutique commission. It was made on my superior's instruction. Do you really expect to find its worth in a search bar?" Her smugness faltered for a fraction of a second, then she recovered with a scoff. I tipped my head and added, "If you enjoy poking around online, Kyla, try looking up the value of a Medal of Honor." The words landed like a dropped stone. Conversation stalled. Someone near the back audibly swallowed. Faces shifted from smug to confused to outright alarmed. "Wait, she's with the cabinet? And she's this young?" a woman breathed, incredulous. "No wonder she stayed calm. She's backed by the state," another whispered. Kyla's composure unspooled. Her bravado dissolved into a wet, tremoring voice. I didn't know. I thought it was just a regular dress." "Regretting assumptions?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. She couldn't meet my gaze. She turned to Jonas, as if he were an anchor, and begged, "Mr. Fletcher, please. I've been loyal to you for years. Help me." Her plea sounded thin, helpless. I let the silence stretch. My gaze slid over her sweating forehead, then settled on Jonas. "You might stop wasting breath on her," I said, low enough for only those nearby to hear. "Right now, your dear Mr. Fletcher can't even protect himself. Why should he protect you?" Color fled Jonas's face. His jaw tightened. His indignation blazed. "Athena," he snapped, "watch your mouth. Don't forget where you are. This is our city." "Is it, though?" I asked. And then, without hesitation, I drew my phone from my pocket and held it up. "Want me to ask your father who actually pulls the strings around here?" The room tilted toward the doorway. All eyes zeroed in on the screen as I tapped a number. The line rang only a few times. Then a warm, familiar voice answered, casual and unsuspecting. "Miss Stone, the ceremony's about to begin. Everything all right?" My tone cooled like steel. "Mr. Fletcher, Victor, are you comfortable with your family acting like they own the city?" Silence. Then a soft clink, something breaking on his end, and the man's voice, shaken. "Miss Stone, please, calm down." I didn't bother with pleasantries. I spoke plainly, reciting the terms as if reading from a ledger. "You have 10 minutes to be here in person. Show up, or I will make sure the Fletcher name means nothing in this city." For a beat that felt like a held breath, The line was empty. Then the clatter of a cup smashing, so loud it seemed to reverberate in the hall. "I'll be right there," he stammered. The words echoed. The room exhaled as if released from a spell. People stared at one another. Whispers ricocheted around the chandeliers. Someone muttered, "She actually threatened Victor Fletcher." Another voice asked, incredulous, "Are you mad?" Even the cabinet doesn't usually talk like that in public. Jonas stood frozen, fury and humiliation warping his features. He recovered first, spitting the words like venom. "You can't threaten my family and get away with it," he said, voice tight. "We won't let this go." Around us, the atmosphere had shifted from spectacle to crisis. The arrogance that had filled the room minutes ago had been replaced by a new, brittle tension. A realization that the rules had changed, and that the people who thought they were untouchable might be more vulnerable than they ever imagined. I tilted my head slightly, meeting Jonas's cold gaze with a calm smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Mr. Fletcher," I said softly, though every word carried sharp precision, "I think you've misunderstood something. It's not a matter of whether your family will forgive me. It's a question of whether I'll forgive you." The air in the room instantly shifted. Before Jonas could even react, his secretary, an immaculately dressed woman with a sharp bob and an even sharper tongue, stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. "You insolent brat," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "How dare you talk to Mr. Fletcher like that? Do you have a death wish?" With a single flick of her wrist, several large bodyguards emerged from the corners of the room, their suits crisp and movements rehearsed. In seconds, they surrounded me in a tight circle, the scent of cologne and intimidation thick in the air. My pulse quickened, but I didn't back down. I simply crossed my arms and waited. Then, before anything could escalate, a deep, commanding voice thundered from the hallway, firm, authoritative, impossible to ignore. "Stand down now!" The bodyguards froze. The secretary's confidence evaporated in an instant. A few moments later, a middle-aged man appeared in the doorway, his usually composed face slick with sweat and tension. Victor Fletcher, the patriarch of the Fletcher family, looked like he had sprinted all the way here. He took one look at me, then at his son, and instantly understood everything. His expression darkened. "Miss Stone," he said, his tone heavy with remorse as he bowed slightly. "I'm terribly sorry that you were subjected to this. You must have been frightened." The sight of the powerful Mr. Fletcher apologizing like that drew a murmur from the onlookers. Even the secretary seemed frozen mid-breath. "Please, Mr. Fletcher," I replied quietly, stepping forward to steady him before he could bow any lower. "There's no need to apologize. The truth is, just half an hour ago, I ended my engagement with your son. From this point on, our paths no longer cross. There's nothing more between us." A flicker of shock crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a look of deep disappointment, directed not at me, but at Jonas. "Miss Stone," he said gravely, "you've shown more grace than my son deserves." Then, without hesitation, he turned to Jonas and struck him across the face with a resounding crack. The sound echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. "You foolish boy!" Victor roared. "Do you even understand the consequences of what you've done?" Jonas staggered back, clutching his cheek, his ego stinging more than the slap. "Dad, what the hell? I was just following my heart. I don't want to be tied to someone who hides behind a pretty face and a famous name. That's not love." His words were drenched in arrogance, but they didn't wound me. I'd already learned that truth and ego rarely coexist. "Wanting happiness isn't wrong," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But trampling others to get it, that's where the line is drawn." For a brief second, I thought I saw hesitation flicker in Jonas's eyes. But pride won out. His jaw tightened as he sneered, "You can drop the act, Athena. You were never fit to be a Fletcher. I'm the heir of this family, the future of Fletcher Group. You're just a civil servant with a bit of borrowed influence." I raised an eyebrow. Civil servant or not, I serve the people. Something you clearly wouldn't understand. That made Victor snap. His entire frame trembled as he pointed a finger at his son. Jonas, enough. If you utter another word, I'll make sure you never inherit a single cent from this family. The tension was suffocating now. The secretary bit her lip, and even the bodyguards shifted awkwardly. Apologize, Victor ordered. His tone was final, cold as steel. Right now, or I swear I will disown you on the spot. But before Jonas could even open his mouth, Kyla, the ever-loyal secretary, tried to save him. Mr. Fletcher, please be reasonable, she said, forcing a nervous smile. Your son was only trying to protect your family's image. This woman clearly looks down on your name. You shouldn't take her words so seriously. Besides, this is New York. Your family's reputation should come first. A few of the staff nodded timidly, afraid to look directly at their furious boss. Victor's eyes, however, burned with something far beyond anger. There was disgust there, disappointment, and something almost like pity. Protect my family's image? He repeated, his voice low but deadly calm. By humiliating a woman who's done nothing but show dignity and restraint? If this is how you define honor, then I have failed as a father. His words cut through the room like glass. Even Kyla looked pale now, realizing she had gone too far. I stood there silently, watching the once powerful Fletcher family unravel before me. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness, only a quiet, almost sad clarity. To the untrained eye, Victor Fletcher might have looked like just another aging magnate. Tired, gray around the edges, his once commanding presence softened by years of luxury and corporate comfort. But I knew better. Behind that calm exterior was a man who had clawed his way to the top, who would sacrifice his pride and even his own blood if it meant preserving the Fletcher name. Everything he was doing right now had one purpose: to keep his empire intact and win back my favor. I leaned casually against a column in the corner of the grand hall, arms crossed, watching him perform the part of a desperate patriarch. The chandeliers glimmered overhead, casting fractured light across the marble floor as the room held its collective breath. Victor didn't disappoint. His voice thundered through the air like a gavel striking judgment. You, he barked, pointing directly at Jonas's secretary. You're his assistant, aren't you? Then let me make this perfectly clear. As chairman of Fletcher Group, you're fired, effective immediately. A murmur swept through the crowd. The woman's confident posture collapsed in an instant. Her eyes darted toward Jonas, silently begging for help. But Victor wasn't finished. He turned back toward me, forcing a polite but strained smile that didn't quite mask his fear. And let this be clear to everyone in this room, he continued, voice rising again. Anyone who dares speak ill of Miss Stone today, anyone, will find themselves unemployed before sunset. No exceptions. The final word echoed like a hammer blow. Kyla's composure shattered. Her mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled at her sides, and for the first time that day she looked afraid. Then, of course, came Jonas, the one person in the room still too proud, too naive to see how deep the pit he dug truly was. Dad! He snapped, striding forward, his voice laced with disbelief. What gives you the right to fire my secretary? She didn't do anything wrong. Before you even showed up, this woman, he jabbed a finger toward me, was threatening to shut down our company, and now you're siding with her? A wave of discomfort rippled through the onlookers. Even those loyal to the Fletchers exchanged uneasy glances. I watched him quietly, the corner of my mouth lifting in a faint, almost pitying smile. Still so sure of himself, still blind to the truth. Poor Jonas. He thought his family's influence stretched farther than it did. He'd grown up believing the world bowed to his name, never realizing that in the right circles, he was the one who'd be bowing. Because power, real power, was never his to hold. It was mine. Victor knew it too. The color drained from his face as he grabbed his son's arm and hissed, "Not another word." Then, realizing even that wasn't enough, he clamped his hand over Jonas's mouth, panic flickering in his eyes. "Miss Stone, he said, his voice trembling as he turned back to me. Please, name your price, whatever it takes to make this right. A quiet chuckle escaped my lips. Are you serious right now? I asked, my tone sharp but amused. Do you honestly think you can fix this with a blank check? Mr. Fletcher, I've dealt with my fair share of spoiled heirs, but your son, he's in a league of his own. Tell me something. If this had happened to someone else, someone beneath your notice, would you even be here right now? Or would you have had your legal team bury it before it reached daylight? Victor's throat worked soundlessly for a moment before he managed to stammer. You're right, Miss Stone. You're absolutely right. We've handled this poorly. I don't want to argue. I just want to make amends. His humility stunned the room. Even the bodyguards shifted uneasily, clearly unused to seeing their employer this submissive. Jonas, however, was livid. He tore his father's hand away and glared at him, disbelief twisting his features. Dad, what are you doing? He shouted, his voice cracking. We've been one of New York's leading families for decades. We know people, powerful people. How can you just bow to some outsider? The word outsider hung in the air like poison. I met his glare and spoke slowly, deliberately, so that every word hit its mark. So you still think your family runs this city? Jonas's jaw tightened. Let me give you a little reality check, I said, taking a step closer. Your family's power is a shadow of what it used to be. There are 20 families in this city who could wipe the Fletcher name off the map with a single call. And I've sat at their tables. The silence that followed was deafening. Jonas's defiance flickered, but only for a second. He straightened his shoulders, clinging to what little pride he had left. Listen, Athena, he said through clenched teeth. I'm not as gullible as my father. You can put on your act, but I see through you. Try anything against my company, and I'll make sure you regret it. I glanced down at my watch, feigning boredom. Confidence looks good on you, I murmured. But blind arrogance? That's just pathetic. Then, looking up again, I gave a cold, humorless smile. This family you brag about, the one you think can't be touched, it's nothing but a house of cards, and I'm not afraid to blow. I turned back to Victor. Mr. Fletcher, I said evenly, I assume you heard every word your son just said? Victor's lips parted, his face pale and drawn. But before he could speak, I lifted my hand slightly. No need, I said quietly. I've already heard enough. The weight of silence fell once more, heavy, suffocating. In that single moment, it was clear to everyone in the room who truly held the power. And it wasn't the Fletchers. If I don't make myself clear today, I said calmly, my tone edged with warning, people might actually start thinking that someone from a classified government division like me can be trifled with. The words hung in the air, quiet, steady, and terrifyingly certain. Then, right on cue, Jonas's phone began to ring. The sharp tone sliced through the silence like a blade. He flinched, glancing between me and the device in his trembling hand. For a moment, he hesitated, as if answering that call might open a door he wasn't ready to face. Finally, he pressed accept. What did you just say? His voice cracked, disbelief flooding his face. Say that again. The room tensed. A few seconds later, his expression drained of all color. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He stared at me, wide-eyed, pale, terrified, as if I'd just stepped out of a nightmare. What? The company's finances are frozen? All assets under investigation? He repeated in a daze. The cabinet's enforcement unit is handling it directly? His voice broke on the last word. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at the floor as the full weight of the news hit him. Then, looking up, he turned to me, eyes trembling. Athena, he said, almost whispering. Don't tell me. This was you? He sounded like a man begging for the answer not to be true. But even then, even when everything he owned was crumbling before his eyes, he couldn't comprehend the reach of my authority. This time I didn't have to say a word. Victor, who had been holding himself together with the last threads of patience, finally snapped. A roar erupted from him. "Jonas, how could I have raised such a blind fool?" The elder Fletcher slammed his cane hard against the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "You think this is some childish argument?" he shouted. "You've humiliated us, jeopardized our company, and now you've dragged our entire family to the edge of ruin." His voice trembled with fury and grief. He slapped his own thigh, the veins on his neck straining. "Do you have any idea why I wanted you to marry Miss Stone?" he bellowed. "Not for love, not for business, but for survival. I gave you every chance, and you still managed to burn every bridge in sight." He pointed toward the crowd, his hand shaking with anger. "Look around you! You've done this! You!" Every whisper, every gasp from the guests sliced through Jonas's pride like knives. Honestly, if I were just a touch colder, the Fletcher name would have been erased by sunrise. Finally, as his father's words sank in, Jonas's expression shifted. The panic in his eyes deepened as realization dawned. "Wait," he said, voice hoarse. "Dad, are you saying this woman's background is so high-level that even we can't afford to offend her?" The hall fell utterly silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some fearful, others reverent. Even the bodyguards who had surrounded me earlier now stood stiff, avoiding my gaze. Kyla, cowering near the back of the room, looked like she wanted to disappear into the wall. Her hands trembled as she lowered her head, unable to even meet my eyes. I turned toward Jonas, my tone calm and precise. "You should consider yourself very lucky," I said. "Had you pushed me just a little further, you wouldn't be standing here right now. You'd be in handcuffs, answering questions in a federal office." Jonas's eyes filled with tears. His arrogance cracked. His voice came out broken, raw with regret. "Miss Stone, I was wrong. Please, believe me. I didn't know who you were. I never meant to insult you. It was just a misunderstanding. A stupid joke." I tilted my head slightly, raising a brow. "A joke?" I repeated softly. Then, after a short pause, I smiled, cold and humorless. Well, I wasn't laughing, because I took it seriously. That one sentence hit him harder than any physical blow could have. He froze completely, his mouth open, no words coming out. The air in the room seemed to thin. Even Victor, the proud chairman of Fletcher Group, could only sigh heavily, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his son's mistakes. No one dared to speak. Every eye was on me, waiting to see how I'd choose to end this. After a long silence, I finally turned to Victor. He looked exhausted, aged years in the span of an hour. But when I spoke, his head snapped up, hope flickering faintly in his tired eyes. "Mr. Fletcher," I began quietly, "for the sake of my mother, I might be willing to spare your family from complete ruin. But..." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "It comes with one condition." At once, Victor straightened, his voice earnest and desperate. "Miss Stone, anything you ask, anything. Just say it, and I'll agree. I swear it." I studied him for a moment, then slowly lifted my hand and pointed toward Jonas, who was still wiping his face with the back of his trembling hand. A faint, almost playful smile curved my lips. "Mr. Fletcher," I said, my voice low and deliberate, "have you ever heard the saying, 'When you open a can of worms, you'd better be ready to clean up the mess'?" The color drained from Jonas's face. He didn't know it yet, but I was about to teach him exactly what that meant. The air in the hall turned heavy the moment I finished speaking. Jonas's face, already pale, twisted with disbelief. "What's that supposed to mean, Athena?" he barked, voice trembling beneath forced bravado. "You trying to turn my father against me now?" I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly, my tone sharp but calm. "Funny. You were just on your knees begging me to spare your family a few minutes ago. Now that I'm giving you a way out, you don't like the terms?" My gaze swept across the crowd, investors, relatives, and board members, each one holding their breath, unsure which side to take. You see, Jonas, I continued, voice lowering to a cool whisper. Being merciful is exhausting work, especially when the person you're trying to save doesn't even realize how deep he's already fallen. I pointed toward the silver trash bin near the wall. Inside it, my once beautiful wedding gown lay crumpled and stained, a ghost of what it was meant to be. Someone ruined my dress, I said evenly, and someone needs to answer for that. But your secretary? She's not worth the trouble. You, however. I paused, letting the words hang. You're just high enough to take responsibility. The statement hit the room like thunder. Victor's face froze. The man who had ruled the Fletcher group with an iron hand for decades suddenly looked every bit his age. He turned slowly toward his son, realization dawning that this wasn't just a social disaster. It was the end of an empire. Miss Stone, Victor finally said after a long silence, his voice rough but steady. You have every right to demand justice. As head of this family, I will handle the matter. He turned toward Jonas, his expression carved in stone. Tomorrow I'll hold a press conference. I'll announce that the Fletcher family and the group will no longer have any association with you. From that moment on, you're on your own. Jonas's jaw dropped. Dad, you can't be serious. He stumbled forward, but Victor didn't even look at him. You're really going to disown your own son over her? But I could tell Victor had already made up his mind. This wasn't just about me. It was about survival. Jonas opened his mouth again, desperate to plead, but no one was listening anymore. The man who once bragged about power and prestige now looked like a cornered animal, stripped of everything that gave him value. As for Kyla, the spark that started it all, she didn't escape either. That same evening, security escorted her out through the back door. Later, I heard she was detained for investigation. Her reckless words about a cabinet-level officer on the phone were enough to ensure her future would be spent behind bars. By nightfall, the grand wedding that was supposed to unite two powerful families had turned into a scandal whispered across the city. Guests left quietly, avoiding eye contact, afraid to be seen taking sides. The hall was silent again, save for the faint echo of my heels against the marble floor as I walked toward the exit. My mother followed close behind, her face pale from everything she had just witnessed. It took nearly an hour to explain things to her, to make her understand why the wedding had to end this way, why I could no longer pretend to be someone ordinary. When I finally finished, she just looked at me with that familiar mix of worry and pride, then sighed. Next time, sweetheart, she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. If you ever decide to get married again, please don't keep your identity a secret from me, all right? My heart's not as strong as it used to be. I managed a small smile. I'll try, Mom. But with my job, there's always something I can't say. As I turned to leave, the empty hall behind me felt like a battlefield, one where silence had been the loudest weapon of all. By the next morning, the news had already spread like wildfire. Every major network ran the same headline. Fletcher Group heir disowned following high-profile wedding collapse. Unknown bride linked to classified government division. Details remain confidential. I sat by the window of my apartment, sipping coffee as the city stirred to life outside. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to hide behind another name or pretend to be someone ordinary. A familiar ringtone pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled faintly before answering. "Good morning, Director," I said calmly. "Morning, Agent Stone," came the low, steady voice on the other end. "Quite the show you pulled yesterday. Half the cabinet's been fielding calls since dawn." "I'm aware," I replied, watching the sunlight dance on the glass table. It wasn't planned, but it served its purpose. There was a brief chuckle on the line. "You do realize your identity won't stay secret anymore. After what happened with the Fletchers, people are starting to dig. The Stone name doesn't exactly go unnoticed." I leaned back in my chair. Let them dig. They'll find the truth sooner or later. Later that afternoon, I visited my mother. She was sitting in the garden, watering her favorite orchids, her expression soft but tired. "Mom," I said gently, It's time you heard the whole story. She set the watering can aside and looked up at me. Go on. I took a deep breath. You already know I work for the government, but what you don't know is that I'm not just an ordinary civil servant. I was recruited into the Strategic Security Division when I was 18, one of the youngest analysts they'd ever taken in. Eventually, I moved into operations. Her eyes widened slightly, but she stayed silent. The Stone family has been tied to national service for decades, I continued. Grandfather was one of the founding members of the Security Council, and Dad, well, he wasn't just a diplomat. He was one of the architects of the current international intelligence framework. Her lips parted, trembling. So all this time, you were following in his footsteps? I nodded. Every assignment, every cover identity, it was all part of my work. When I met Jonas, I thought maybe I could live a normal life. But power attracts greed, and greed always reveals who people really are. Mom reached for my hand, her touch warm and trembling. You've been carrying too much on your own, Athena. You shouldn't have had to face them alone yesterday. I wasn't alone, I said softly. I just needed them to see the difference between strength and cruelty. That evening, I stood by the balcony as the city lights came alive. The press conference had aired hours ago, Victor Fletcher's public statement cutting his son off from the family's fortune. The world would move on soon, but the Fletchers' name would never recover. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the director. It was a message from a restricted channel. Mission declassified. Authorization granted to restore public record. A. Stone, daughter of Ambassador Leon Stone and Dr. Amelia Vance Stone. I stared at the screen for a long time. For years I had been a shadow, a ghost in government files, erased to protect operations. But now, the world would finally know who I was. I whispered to myself, so this is what freedom feels like. The wind carried the scent of rain, cool and cleansing. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. Not as Agent Stone, not as the bride who walked away, but simply as Athena Stone, the woman who survived it all. As the first drops began to fall, I smiled faintly. The world could speculate, whisper, and wonder. But the truth was simple. I wasn't the girl who lost everything. I was the woman who chose herself.